And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is a deck building channel. That is the main purpose of this channel, EDH Deck Building. It's all about a combination of I'm sort of giving you guys my insights on how to build commander decks, and also, of course, I'm putting decks on my channel all the time, and I will be doing so again in this video. But this video is part of a larger sort of project where I'm leading up to my own personal decks video, which I do every year, usually about in March. So we're approaching, and there's a couple of videos I wanted to do beforehand because I really have changed a lot about my deck building strategy, and I don't want to get into it too much because I will be saving that for other videos. But this is one of the videos that is leading up to that video because there's a lot to talk about, and I didn't want to save it all for one video because it's already going to be probably an hour long. So there's a few other things I will touch on in this video and maybe a couple other videos leading up to that. But in this video in particular, I'm talking about a specific deck, one of the most interesting decks I've ever made, which is part of the reason why I have changed my deck building strategy a little bit, which I will get into, but let's start out by looking at the deck. So this is my Val Candlekeep Researcher deck, which I've actually talked about this deck a few times already on my channel. It's probably the most anticipation I've ever had on my channel for a deck. I've had a few people already asking me about it and how I went about building it in the deck list and all of that. I first introduced this idea, or at least I started talking about the commander in a 5 builds video, because I honestly, I don't even know where I stumbled across this commander, but I just thought there was a lot of neat directions you could go with it. So 3 in a blue human wizard, 2/3 with vigilance. Tap, add an amount of colorless equal to Val Candlekeep Researcher's toughness. This mana can't be spent to cast spells from your hand. And of course, it is a background commander, which means we can choose a background. And when I talked about this one in the 5 builds video, I mean, obviously tapping for its toughness means 3 right out of the gate, but clearly you can build around that. Now, having your commander tap for 3 colorless mana means you can do a whole lot of neat things with that mana. It is colorless mana, and it is obviously not be able to use from casting spells from your hand, but that you know, as I talked about in that video, there's a lot of ways to work around that. And I came up with a bunch of neat ways in this deck. That is where the deck started. Actually, where the deck started is with the background that I chose. So the background I chose for this deck is Tavern Brawler. So this is an Izzet deck. So 2 and a red, legendary enchantment background. Commander creatures you own have at the beginning of your upkeep, exile a top card of your library. This creature gets +X +0 until end of turn, where X is the card's mana value. You may play that card this turn. Now, why did I choose this? For 2 reasons. One, because when you exile a top card of your library, obviously that is a card that you can play from exile, which means you can use your commander's ability for it, right? Which is great. Now, the unfortunate part here is that this is giving you +X +0 until end of turn, where X is the card's mana value. So your commander, let's say we exile something that costs mana value 4, your commander is now going to be a 6/3, which is okay. You can attack with it. It does have vigilance, although that seems a little weird on a human wizard. However, the neat thing I came up with here, that it was the original genesis for the deck, is the power toughness switching thing, which of course is done best in blue and red colors. So for example, Dwarven Thaumaturgist and the color changed, planar chaos version, Merfolk Thaumaturgist, both will do this, and funny enough, they both have tapping abilities, so that fits with our commander too, who also has a tap ability, right? So tap, switch target creature's power and toughness until end of turn. So if we get that 4 mana value thing off the top, our Val is now a 6/3, and we can tap our Merfolk Thaumaturgist to switch our commander's power and toughness. So now it is a 3/6. So now it taps for 6 mana. So that's a really neat thing that you can do in this deck. And I did it way more originally. Originally, I was doing that almost exclusively, and I was very much doing the cast things from exile or cast things from anywhere other than your hand, like Keeper of Secrets, right? Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. So that is in the deck. But again, I was doing that a lot more. The majority of this deck was cast from exile and the power toughness switching strategy. And I did leave a lot of that in. Now, the reason why I moved a little bit more away from that is because there was a whole bunch of other neat things that I wanted to do in this deck. Now, first of all, I wanted to take advantage of the fact that my commander is adding an absolute ton of mana, right? So Planar Portal, for example, which is a card that, you know, a lot of people would consider that to be a really, really bad tutor, although it is a repeatable tutor, I thought was a great fit in this deck. First of all, if we exile it off the top with our Tavern Brawler, it costs 6 mana, but our commander can very easily pay for most of that, right? You have to take that into consideration when including cards in this deck. And of course, pay 6 and tap, search your library for a card and put it in your hand, then shuffle. So repeatable tutor, 6 mana is a lot. But again, our commander at the very least is paying for 3 of that. So we just tap our commander and then we just need 3 more mana to go get any card out of our library. That's pretty fantastic. And also, it's a tap ability, so the tapping, untapping thing works here as well. Monstrosity of the Lake is one of my favorite includes here. 4 and a blue, Kraken 4/6. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay 5. If you do, tap all creatures your opponents control, then put a stun counter on each of those creatures. And of course, the you may pay 5 part can be paid with our commander's ability. Again, we can pay just 3 if that's all we have, and then we only need 2 extra. But if we have the entire 5, right, again, we don't have to be using our commander's ability to be casting stuff from other places. We can just use it for abilities like this, and this is a fantastic one. We just pay the 5 mana for this, and if our commander has a 5 toughness, we can just pay the 5 with our commander very easily. This also has Island Cycling 2, which is another thing that we can do with our commander's ability. We can pay for cycling costs with our commander's ability, which led me down another road, and I brought this up in my last 10 deck ideas video where I touched on this quite a bit more. And again, that's where people are like, this seems like a really interesting idea. Do you have a deck for it? Yes, I actually do have a deck for it, because the reason why I talked about it actually in my 10 deck ideas video, I didn't actually have it on the list originally. I added it to the list because I was working on this deck and I just thought it was such a neat idea. The idea that I added onto this deck, because again, I just came up with this idea completely separately, but it happened to work here because we were in the right colors for one, and then also the whole cycling thing works great with our commander's ability because our commander can very easily pay for cycling costs. It starts with Homing Sliver. Very interesting creature, 2 and a red, Sliver 2/2. Each Sliver card in each player's hand has Sliver Cycling 3. And of course, this card itself has Sliver Cycling 3, which means you pay 3 mana, discard this card, search your library for a Sliver card, reveal it, and put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. And of course, the Sliver Cycling can be paid by our commander. In fact, it's exactly 3. So we don't need any bumping or buffing here at all. Just tap our commander and we can Sliver Cycling this guy. Now, of course, we don't want to Sliver Cycling this guy. The reason why is because we need this guy on the battlefield. Because when this guy's on the battlefield, then each Sliver card in our hand has Sliver Cycling 3, which means we can cycle it to go get another one. And indeed, we do have a couple other Slivers in this deck, Scuttling Sliver being the best one. This is actually a slam dunk in a Val deck and also happens to be a Sliver. 2 and a blue, Sliver, Trilobite 2/2. Sliver creatures you control have pay 2, untap this creature. Hey, there's a great ability that we can pay for with our commander's ability, but gets a whole lot better, of course, if we can turn our commander into a Sliver, which also gets a whole lot better with the Homing Sliver as well, right? So there's a whole lot of things forming here. I will first touch on the combo that I came up with, which of course, Sliver Cycling is great in a Sliver deck, but obviously if you turn all your other creatures into Slivers, it works particularly well. So of course, the easiest way to do that is with Maskwood Nexus. Now, all of our creatures are Slivers, and Maskwood Nexus is, again, a particularly good fit here because it has another ability, pay 3, tap, create a 2/2 blue shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. So we can actually activate that ability, which playtesting this deck I've done quite a few times, crank out those shapeshifter tokens with my commander's ability. Trying not to get all gummed up with all the different things that are going on here, let's quickly go back to the Scuttling Sliver. If our commander is now a Sliver, we have infinite mana. That's it. 2 cards in play, we have infinite mana. This is a neat little infinite mana combo if you have a Val deck. We have the Maskwood Nexus in play. Our commander is a Sliver. Our commander has this ability. Our commander has this pay to untap this creature. So we pay 2 of the 3 mana we just made, untap our commander, and then we can repeat the process. So a very easy, not that hard to assemble, infinite mana combo in this deck. Only colorless mana, but still pretty good. I also have Chromatic Ori in the deck, which, it's just a slam dunk in this deck because you may spend mana as though or mana of any color, makes our Val essentially tap for mana of any color. It also taps to add 5 colorless, which is essentially mana of any color, and it also has pay 5 tap, draw a card for each color among permanents you control. Now, pay 5 tap to draw 2 cards, which is what we have in this deck. We have a 2-color deck here. It's not super great, but again, it has that 5 mana ability that our commander can very easily pay for. So this is essentially going to be like pay 1 or 2 mana to draw 2 cards, which is great. But mostly this is in the deck for essentially the color filtering ability. However, I haven't gotten to all the pieces of the combo here. The other really neat part of this combo is Falkenrath Gorger. As I talked about in my 10 deck ideas, this is just such a really neat combo, I think. So Falkenrath Gorger is a 1 red mana vampire berserker 2/1. Each vampire creature card you own that isn't on the battlefield has madness. The madness cost is equal to its mana cost. So of course that means if you discard this card, you can discard it into exile, very important wording there. And if you do, you can cast it. So you are casting it from exile. Now, why this combo works so great in this deck? Couple of reasons. First of all, we already want to do the creature type changing thing, right? So we have our Homing Sliver in play, and also our Falkenrath Gorger in play, and also our Maskwood Nexus in play. Yes, there is a lot of components involved here. It's not like the greatest combo ever. It's just a funny, interesting one. But once you get it going, it's fantastic, right? What happens here is with the Maskwood Nexus in play, all of our creatures are slivers and vampires, which is why the Maskwood Nexus is by far the best fit here. I do have other options. I got Arcane Adaptation in the deck. It does work. This only changes 1 creature type, which makes it a little more difficult. It's likely you want all creature types changed. Essentially you want all your creatures to be changelings so that both the Homing Sliver and the Falkenrath Gorger will work. So with these cards in play, and of course, our commander can be used to pay for the cycling cost. What ends up happening is I can now cycle any creature. Okay, so let's say, for example, I have my Ornithopter of Paradise in my hand, right? This is a vampire and a sliver, so it has all those abilities. I can now discard my Ornithopter of Paradise. I can sliver cycling it to go get any other creature in my deck because, of course, all the creatures in my library are also slivers. So I can now pay 3, and of course, the pay 3 part can be paid with my commander's ability. I discard my Ornithopter of Paradise and go get any creature out of my deck to put in my hand. However, I'm not just throwing my Ornithopter of Paradise away because, of course, my Ornithopter of Paradise is also a vampire, so this is where the Falkenrath Gorger comes in. I am discarding this, right? So because I'm discarding it with the cycling ability, I can now use the Madness ability, right? If you discard a card with Madness, you can discard it into exile. So now I'm discarding my Ornithopter of Paradise into exile. On top of the fact that I can now cast it, I can also cast it with my commander's ability because my commander's ability, again, can be used to cast things from exile. That's why the cast from exile strategy works really good here with the whole Madness thing, because Madness is casting from exile. So now if I, again, have my Keeper of Secrets in play, as I cast these cards from Madness, I can throw a bunch of damage around as well. So it all fits really nicely in the deck. The first creature I'm going to go search for when I am sliver cycling is my Chakram Retriever. Once you have this guy in play, now you can really go to town, right? 4 and a blue, Elemental Hound 2/4, partner with Chakram Slinger, which no, we do not have in the deck. Whenever you cast a spell during your turn, untap target creature. So again, the untapping thing we do a lot in this deck. Of course, the untapping theme works great here. This guy is the go-to though, because of course, every time I cast a spell from exile with Madness, I am now going to use my Chakram Retriever to untap my commander, and essentially you have infinite mana. You can use the Scuttling Sliver here to get the infinite mana to cycle through your entire, casting and cycling all the creatures in your deck and getting everything into play that you want to. Or you can use the Chakram Retriever. Either one will work here. Again, it kind of depends on which creatures you have in play or which cards you have in play, whatever works best. But you continually keep untapping your commander, and your commander becomes the engine for which all this works, because it can both cycle the cards from your hand with the sliver cycling and also cast those cards from exile. Now, again, colorless mana is going to be the best option here because that's what our commander is giving us. That's why the chromatic orrery is so important. Bumping our commander's power is also really, really important as well. That's why the swapping thing does work, the power toughness swapping, but also you can put stuff in the deck like, of course, Slagworm Armor, which again, equipment works really, really well here. Another thing that I just incidentally discovered, we can cast our Val Candlekeep Researcher and immediately tap it. I mean, I guess if you have a haste enabler, immediately tap it. And of course, this is equip 3. Our commander pays for that ability. Our commander can equip itself with Slagworm Armor. So Val actually makes a great equipment commander as well, because essentially pays for all equip costs. Now our commander has a 9 toughness. That's a whole lot of mana, right? And now it's just very easy to pay for everything. Endoskeleton is another neat one. 2 mana artifact. You may choose not to untap Endoskeleton during your untap step. This is basically equipment before equipment existed, right? Pay 2 and tap. Target creature gets +0/+3 for as long as Endoskeleton remains tapped. So again, we have a pay 2 colorless mana ability that we can very easily pay with our commander. And this makes our commander a 2/6. Not too shabby. So we have the toughness bumping thing as well. Obviously, we got some tutors here to get the pieces we need, like Whir of Invention. You know, we are definitely going to be needing that. This isn't entirely built around that combo. You can very much make the deck work without any of that stuff. Skyship Weatherlight is a favorite of mine from back in the day. Really neat colorless tutor option that just happens to work great here. 4 mana, legendary artifact. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for any number of artifact and or creature cards and exile them. So of course, artifacts and creatures are exactly what we want here to assemble our combo. Pay 4 and tap, choose a card at random that was exiled with Skyship Weatherlight, put that card into hand. So you're going to choose a card at random, so you don't want to go get a ton of stuff here. You probably just want to get 2 or 3 of the important pieces. You do have to be careful. If a clever opponent you have Krosan grips this, you will lose those pieces and never see them again. But pay 4 and tap is exactly what we want to see in this deck, not only because our commander can pay for this ability, but it's also a tap thing. So the untapping stuff works here as well. I also have Junk Troller in the deck, which is, I guess, a decent graveyard hate piece, but works particularly well here. Again, this is another thing that I realized I needed in this deck through playtesting. This is a deck I have playtested an absolute ton, so I've sort of worked out all the issues that here. 4 mana, artifact creature golem, 0/6 with defender. Great blocker. Again, with the tap ability, put target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. So yeah, we can use this for graveyard hate at instant speed if someone's about to reanimate a creature. But more importantly, I have an important piece I need. Go to my graveyard, right? Izzet decks don't do recursion very well, but because of the sliver cycling and all the tutoring we're doing here, I can very easily slide that creature on the bottom of my library so that I can go get it again. Once you start with the sliver cycling, you might not have your Falkenrath Gorger in play, so I can sliver cycling go get my Falkenrath Gorger, and the creature that I just chucked in my graveyard, I actually want that. And of course, I couldn't cast it for madness, so instead, I'll tuck it on the bottom of my library so that I can now go tutor for it again once I start with the sliver cycling, right? So that ability, the ability to do that, and of course, Junk Troller is a creature that we can very easily go tutor for. That's very important to have in the deck. And the Lost and the Damned is just an absolute slam dunk here. And funny enough, again, another video where I hinted at this. I talked about this in a 5 cards video where, again, I was already working on this deck when I was talking about this card. I don't know if you can tell from me talking about it in the video, but talk about an absolute slam dunk in this deck. So 1 blue and a red enchantment. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control from anywhere other than your hand, which is a possibility here, or you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, create a 3/3 red spawn creature token. What a slam dunk in this deck. This guy is just cranking out those 3/3 tokens. It is essentially a win con in the deck because you are casting stuff from exile constantly with both your Tavern Brawler and obviously the Madness abilities, and you get them through a lot of other ways as well, right? Like just Burnished Heart. Our commander can pay for that 3 mana, so it essentially becomes just sacrifice to go get 2 lands. But as I talked about, why this card is really, really great in so many decks is because just ramping in general is going to trigger your Lost and the Damned, because that is a land entering the battlefield from anywhere other than your hand. So it's very easy to crank out these tokens. This is essentially a win con in the deck. But my favorite win con in the deck by far is Colossus of Akros. This is a card that, I don't know, I've been fascinated with since the first time I ever saw it. It is easily one of the best win cons in this deck, in my opinion. And once you get the Sliver cycling combo going, you will go get this. So it's an 8 mana artifact creature golem 10/10. So again, the 8 colorless mana is great because I know that sounds like a lot, but guess what? If our commander has the Slagworm armor on and we either exile this with our Tavern Brawler or we are doing the Madness thing, which is both likely scenarios, we can very easily cast this guy by just tapping our commander. Has Defender and Indestructible. So it's a 10/10 indestructible creature, has Monstrosity 10, but you have to pay 10 mana, which again seems insane, except our commander does it very, very easily. If we have either the untapping scenario or the Slagworm armor or the Scuttling Sliver or so many different scenarios, it is very easy to pay that 10 colorless mana for the Monstrosity 10. So of course, Monstrosity 10 meaning if this creature isn't monstrous, you put 10+1/+1 counters on it and it becomes monstrous. So it's now a 20/20 with Defender and Indestructible. However, as long as it is monstrous, it has trample and can attack as though it didn't have Defender. So it is now just a 20/20 indestructible trampling creature. Pretty great way to close out the game, in my opinion. This is a really, really neat deck. I started with the idea of, okay, well, what if I do the power toughness switching thing? That seems pretty neat. And then the tapping untapping theme sort of fell in there because my commander has an tapping ability and also the power toughness switching creatures do as well. And then I came up with that combo with the Homing Sliver and the Falkenrath Gorger completely separately, and that very easily fit into the deck, and it all just sort of came together. It is niche, it is janky. If you like janky, neat decks, it's great there. The combo is really important to the deck, and you can be the guy that just, you try to assemble that combo every game if you want to. Sure, absolutely, you can do that. You can play the deck that way. There's a lot of looting in the deck. You will notice, if you're looking through the deck list, you'll notice like Unctus, for example, you'll notice Urza, Powerstone Prodigy. Those guys are in the deck for the looting because looting works really well with I'm digging to the cards that I want, right? So you can do that. You can just play this deck trying to assemble that really awesome combo. But once you assemble the combo, it's not like, okay, that's game over. It's just, okay, now I can just start getting the pieces I want. Now I can go get any creature out of my deck that I want. I can go get my Colossus of Akros and close out the game with that. I can go get my Monstrosity of the Lake and have that guy enter the battlefield and tap down on my opponent's creatures, right? There's a lot of problem-solving creatures in this deck. It's a little bit of a toolbox creature deck as well, which is kind of funny in Izzet colors. It's just very, very unique that way. One of the most unique decks I've ever made. It's not the easiest deck in the world to play, I will warn you, okay? It can be a little difficult. There's a lot of moving parts here for sure. You're in the discard theme. You're in the madness theme. You're in the I want to bump my commander's toughness theme. You're in the cast from exile theme. You're in the untapping theme as well. There's so many moving parts here. It's a super interesting deck. One of the most interesting decks I've ever made. I was very close to putting this together in paper and I didn't get there with it. It just isn't necessarily, maybe because I play tested it so much. I don't know if I've ever play tested a deck as much as this one. Maybe the deck I will be talking about in the next video comes close. This is a deck I play tested an absolute ton. It definitely moved far away from where I originally started. It is a super interesting deck. The deck list, of course, is in the description if you're at all interested. How does this play into my videos moving forward? It is sort of a beginning of me moving more in a direction of, yes, this deck is built around the commander quite a bit, but it's doing so many other different things in it that I don't necessarily need my commander to be in play in order to make it work. But also, I have these things I want to be doing in the deck more so than what the commander is. I guess you could swap out commanders here. It wouldn't work nearly as good, but you could take this deck and swap out commanders with, I don't know, some run-of-the-mill Izzet commander and still make this deck work. It wouldn't work as good, I don't think. I mean, you probably would definitely want to, like Slagworm armor doesn't seem nearly as good if you swap out commanders. You could take the crux of this deck and swap it out for maybe a Izzet commander that's doing a discard theme. Definitely, right? So that is sort of what I'm talking about here. The bones of this deck could very easily be swapped out. The toughness bumping stuff you take out, and then you replace it with a commander that is doing maybe a discard theme or something like that. And you could definitely do the deck that way as well. So I guess what I'm saying is here, I'm trying to move more in a direction of making decks where you can very easily swap out commanders. Although I will say that Val is a really great commander here, and it works both fantastically with the casting things from exile with the madness and the activated abilities that I have put in this deck. Really, really interesting deck, I think. One of the most interesting I've ever made. If you're at all interested, the deck list is in the description below. Feel free to give it a run for yourself. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.